hello and welcome in from the far out ice planet of Hoth, because that is where I feel like I am broadcasting from for a new edition of the Now We Know podcast. It is First Friday, but not really First Friday, Second Friday, but still all the same fun with Brian Flynn from Super7. Brian,
That's
thanks
right.
for joining us.
I do like the new outfits in Hoth. They must have gotten better space heaters as you're down to just t-shirts.
Yeah.
No more quilted jackets.
I don't have my Wookiee fur-lined coats around here because we're friends with the Wookiees around here. So it's just t-shirts because we are buried underneath snow here. There are all kinds of weather things going on right now, but are things where you are pretty normal for the most part?
Yeah, no, I've had a lot of people reach out to me, and thank you to anyone that has. Just generally speaking, San Francisco is about a 5.5 hour drive from LA. Mm-hmm. So we're quite a bit of ways from them. That said, I think any of us that have been to LA and have spent time like where those areas of town are and how far they are. Like the fact that once that fire has gotten into the city and it's just tearing through it, it's crazy. Like,
yeah,
they talk about Pacific Palisades and you're like, what does that mean? But it's like, it's this giant hilly area overlooking Santa Monica where the Eames house is. And it's like, oh, well, if it comes down any further, you're on the promenade of Santa Monica. And there's stuff over by the Hollywood Hills. And you're like, that's where the Lautner house is and some other stuff. But it's like, all of that stuff is just moving. And it's hard. A few years ago, there was a big fire up in Santa Rosa, which a lot of people may have heard about, that tore through part of the city. I have friends that live up there that lost places, friends that didn't. And with the winds that were going, the fire was moving at 40 miles an hour, which sounds like that's crazy and it sounds abstract. But what I want to say to you is, from where you live, where exactly are you again?
I'm in Kansas City.
You're in Kansas City. So I don't know my middle geography quite as well, but what's the next big city away from you?
It's either Chicago or Denver. So Chicago's probably by distance closer.
Okay, and how far is Chicago? A drive?
I want to say, yeah, it's a bit of a drive. Yeah,
like a 5-hour drive?
Probably 6 or 7. Right. Yeah.
So this analogy is not going to work well. But what I was going to say is, like, in the case of San Francisco, San Jose is down the peninsula.
They're in an hour.
They're an hour away, right? But you're still talking about 45 miles.
Yeah.
So if San Jose is burning, what you're like, that's way the fuck over there.
Yeah.
But it's moving at 40 miles an hour. Like, you can be like, oh, San Jose on fire. And an hour later, like, no, it's where I am.
Yeah.
That's the crazy part. When you put it into actual distances that you can relate to, you go 40 miles away. So in the case of LA, where they were having 80 mile an hour winds, and the fire is literally just leaping half a mile on from one roof to the next. You're like, can you imagine, 40, 60, 80 miles away? You wouldn't even consider that dangerous. And the fact that it could be there at your doorstep in an hour to an hour and a half is crazy.
Yeah, I think of my brother, like in Brooklyn. It's like, just think about what 40 miles away from that is. It's crazy. But yeah, I've been keeping in touch with some friends in the area, and I know a couple people who have had to evacuate, but as far as they know, they haven't lost anything. But it's just it's crazy. It's so sad.
Well, and the people that I have seen that I'm tangentially, I've met you, I'm a fan of your work or whatever. It's the same thing where they were like, oh, there's a fire. Hey, we got an evacuation notice. We didn't have time to grab anything. Like, it was moving so fast that us and the kids or the dog got out. I didn't even have time to go back inside and grab anything before it was too late. And you're just like, crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. I'm hoping with the winds having started to die down and whatnot, they're going to be able to get some relief, but it's just already the devastation from it. I mean, we're talking decade
Oh,
of time.
Easily. I know what happened in Santa Rosa was after parts of that burned. The first thing you had was, insurance companies not trying to do
Right.
their part.
Because that's
Then you
what
had
they
an
do.
influx of people that are there to grift off of it all. Like, we'll replace your roof, we'll fix your house, pay us cash, we'll get whatever,
Mhm.
and everything. And and then you have to wait for the resources and the people to be able to build it. And then who's getting first priority, second priority, third priority? Like, it will literally, for that much of LA, it'll take a decade before it's all rebuilt.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah. And unfortunately, afterwards, it's not like you just had a terrible experience. And then in a lot of ways, you're going to see the worst of humanity.
The worst of it.
Too.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, let's bring it down even further.
I was gonna say, well, thinking of all of our friends and whatnot in that area, and hoping that things get better, at least with the actual fires themselves soon. But we're gonna maybe try to throw a little bit of distraction because we've got some things to talk about. We were going to talk about
toys.
I know. We were going to talk about some things, but then the weather delayed things to me. But that doesn't stop you guys from making announcements about some new stuff. So I know we often kind of have an ultimates bent to our conversations with this, but today I think we're going to go more in like the reaction and reaction plus direction because there's been some exciting stuff that you guys have been showing off over the past couple of days.
It's been a, hey, we know this is coming, but we're not talking about it stuff for quite some time.
And I think maybe if you are all right with it, we will start with something that, at least a property that we talk about, somewhat often on this show. And that is Silverhawks. And they have finally, after of much anticipation, made their way to reaction and in that lovely vac metal that we were all hoping for.
Yeah. I don't think we had a vac metal reaction sample. I think I might have showed you that was for a different license that we're testing on this. But yeah, this is another one where, quietly in the shadows, been working on it a little bit and finally getting this out the door. I mean, it's hard to not be seduced by that vac metal, especially when you see the hero shots of these figures.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's another one of those things like, Thundercats reaction did fine. Like I said, didn't do bad, but it also didn't do great. So when you're getting into Silverhawks, which is more obscure, you're like, let's see. I'm optimistic. Yeah. I'm excited, but I can say as somebody that even was like, when you see them, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotta have these. So I'm pretty excited about it. That doesn't always translate to everybody else being excited about it, but I'm pretty pumped up on these. I think they look great. I feel like like I said, you get seduced by the vac metal on the three of them, but that Monstar also just looks great. They did a really great job translating him into that sort of 3 3/4 reaction look.
Yeah, and I think that this type of reaction figures, I think they lend themselves very well to the vac metal treatment because we've talked about it.
The joints are much easier.
Yes, the joints are much easier, so it feels like it's right there. I think from a nostalgia purpose too. I mean, Silverhawks. You were talking about Thundercats. Thundercats were big figures even back in the 80s, but Silverhawks were quite a bit smaller.
4.5.
Yeah. So this kind of pulls them in a little bit closer to that. And, I said, I can't wait for that toy version of my boy Bluegrass and Ultimates, but it's going to be great to see that metallic teal in the first wave here ahead of that. So I'm definitely looking forward to him for sure. But this version of Monstar, he didn't, this was something.
Yeah, yeah. This was one of our first samples. This will not happen. Like, look at how good that looks. This was us testing it out on reaction and just like, oh, hell yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
And it's something about that. I don't know. It's cool to have, like I said, the Ultimates versions, but it's like with these, you mentioned the joints. There aren't as many pieces to have to do this to, but it's also it's just cleaner in terms of cuts and whatnot. And it's like when you get more of that surface area just in that reflective vac metal, it's really cool.
There's a lot of shine.
Yeah, so shiny. And
what is
and
it? Shine on, Proud Warrior.
You crazy diamond, you
Yeah,
crazy Silverhawks. Yeah, but
we'll just mash it up.
I like that we're getting this version of Monstar in the first series as well, because I don't know, it's crazy. His armored version is really, really cool, but I've always like kind of preferred this version of him, and it's cool to see that. So this is a cool lineup. I'm glad to see it happening, and I think people are excited because this is what, like I said, from a nostalgia pull, in terms of like the closer scale and definitely the shininess of the vac metal. I think people are excited for this.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they turned out really great.
Well.
And I like reaction figures. So hey.
Yeah. So hey. Yeah. And if we didn't have so much snow here, I'd probably have them to show off. But we will do that next time, because I'll definitely want to talk to you about them once I have them in hand. But so Silverhawks came earlier in this week, but then also you had some Reaction Plus news, which people don't know by the branding.
What's Wave 2 going to look like?
Yeah, what is Wave 2 of Reaction Plus?
They kind of knew what the line list was. Yeah,
but I've got to tell you, this was a very surprising lineup. That is surprising in the best way, because two of them, it's like, okay, Duke and Serpentor. It's like, all right, these are main characters, but we'll talk about the other two here in a second. Just wild choices.
Yeah. But once again, with Reaction Plus, we're entering a toy line that has had a lot of figures made over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're hearkening back to the first few years of G.I. Joe, the first 5-6 years, really trying to play in that vernacular. And what do you not have? I don't need to make you things you already have.
Yeah.
Things that you can go buy on eBay today. But do you have a cartoon accurate Duke? You don't.
Right.
So let's get you a cartoon accurate Duke. That is new to you. Serpentor, which is your next. Same thing. Can we get cartoon accurate with Serpentor? I'm sure somebody will argue that it's not different enough in some ways from the toy Serpentor, but I think when you get into some of these brand name villains, if you will, I think there's enough people that are like, no, I want this one and this one and this one. And we were like, let's really get a Serpentor that feels like it walked out of the cartoon.
And I mean, his design, like you said, it's one of those things. It's just like, how do you not want every version of this character, especially if you're a big Joe fan, because his design is just amazing.
Yeah, he's a classic.
Yeah, and then, he's a classic. But then,
ironically, both these oversized figures ended up being in the same wave. But yeah,
oversized.
What are those things that people have been talking about forever?
Yeah.
And we had a bunch of internal dialogue like, do you have to, in the shows, these guys tower over everybody else. So we're going to scale them up, which is not something you would do back in the first 5-6 years of G.I. Joe. Even if that guy was bigger on screen, he wouldn't be bigger in toy form. Destro's the same height as everybody else.
Yeah.
So, but we're like, I think you kind of need to make them bigger. They need to stand and tower over. And one of those that everybody always brings up, now whether they bring it up versus buy it are two different conversations. Is Raymar. You always hear about Raymar. We never got a Raymar. So, all right, here's Raymar, with his mind control headband on, ready to fight Duke at Cobra Commander's behest.
Yeah. This oversized Reaction Plus is that's exciting, because to your point, I mean, I didn't collect Joes when I was a kid, but a lot of action figure lines fell into that. Even if they're bigger characters, they're not going to be bigger in the action figure form. So I think the willingness to go, oversized here opens the doors to a lot of things, right?
Well, it's sort of two things that we have to sort of balance. One is like he's not slightly bigger; he's lots bigger in the show. I don't want to get into a thing where somebody's trying to do relative scale, where it's like, well, Cobra Commander should be 1/3 of an inch taller than this, and it's like, no, that we're not making scale replicas. Like we're making O-ring action figures, and we're continuing this line. They should all be the same, but there are exceptions to the rule, and Raymar and the Fatal Fluffies really are those two, where the Fatal Fluffies, when they get big in the show, they're like 7.5, 8 feet tall. So if you make it 3 3/4 exact, it just doesn't feel right, and this is definitely one where I think people have talked about it more humorously over the years, but whatever. I'm just like, they're cool, weird, badass monsters, and nothing like it's ever been made.
Yeah.
Maybe you're into it, maybe you're not. We're gonna find out, but it's definitely part of the G.I. Joe world you don't have. And that's really what we're trying to do, is what is the line extension? What are the characters you don't have?
And to your point, it's a part of the G.I. Joe, line that you don't have, but it's also a corner of just Joe, from the Joe Legendarium, that is like out there and different, but it is a part of it, and it helps to, I think a line like G.I. Joe, for casual people, it's often like, oh well, those are military toys and whatnot, and okay, whatever, but there's a lot of wild stuff that goes on in G.I. Joe, and that's what I love.
Yeah, I know. Here you got the Fatal Fluffies. You're in space with Zartan and the Dreadnoks, and these guys are all of a sudden breathing fire. They've got whips and everything. It's like, what happened here? Like all semblance of reality was thrown out the window with this one, and that's what's so fun about it. At least to me. We'll see if everybody else feels the same way, but. Initially, it seems like people are like, oh, okay, now that I see it, I was confused when I saw Fatal Fluffy, but now that I see it, I'm like, okay, this is cool.
Yeah, and it's good balance too, because like you said, you've got to have characters like Duke and Serpentor, even in their cartoon looks, which people haven't had before, but they have the characters, they know them, and they're familiar with them. But this gets into really fast into universe building and in the right corners of the universe, because like you said, it's never been done. It's wild, it's oversized. So there are so many things about that just haven't been offered before, and now we have the opportunity to see stuff like this in Reaction Plus, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm sure very shortly there's going to be a really great recreation of some of those scenes from the cartoon, but as figures and dioramas of like Fatal Fluffies standing around with the whips and everything, maybe some fake flame in front of like the Joes, shot from behind the Joe's head looking up at these guys. It's a really fun figure.
Yeah, and it's one of those too that it's like it's completely G.I. Joe, but I can see, fans of maybe some other properties enjoying a figure like this too, to fit into kind of their, universe and backgrounds and stuff. Because like you said, space and things like that, it's like it's good to not have a lid when you can pull from all kinds of different lines. And I think people who are fans of other properties will also appreciate a figure like this to get them into like their Alien lineups.
Yeah, I mean, look at that guy.
Well, these are, it's funny because, these were announced, news broke, and people were finding them immediately.
Unfortunately, people were finding, I don't think they're supposed to be on shelf for a little bit. We ended up having to turn them live because all of a sudden, like Target was putting them on shelves apparently, even though they weren't supposed to be on shelf for, I think, another month.
Yeah, a friend of mine posted about them, and I was like, whoa. Have they even announced that yet?
I got sent a thing where it was like, yeah, not sure these are out yet, but I was able to buy these at my local Target. And I'm like, oh, really? Oh, okay.
Well, you know what? I mean,
I'm glad you bought them.
yeah, it's cool, and I realize that logistically got to get announcements out and whatnot. But man, I miss that. It's like you don't know about something until you find it on the pegs. That there's something cool about that. So,
well, the crazier part would have been if we had waited a couple more days for the reveal. He would have scooped everybody, been like, "Look what I just bought at Target."
Yeah,
and the internet totally would have been. It would have been 10 years ago. It would, or 15, 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years ago. Where it's like, this wave's on the shelf. Like, what? What are you talking about? What else? I don't even know what that is. Give me the number on the box.
And to throw in a little bit of that modern flair, there would be people who are like, this photo is fake. That's not real. You didn't really find that. But Fatal Fluffies and Raymar are being found out there on the pegs at Target, and isn't that a wonderful sentence to be able to say?
Target, I think Target.com has it live, Super7.com has it live. I believe Big Bad Toy Store has it live. So, I'm not sure who else has it live. Maybe Diamond, maybe Entertainment Earth. I would assume they've got it. But please support all of our retail partners. Target, Big Bad Toy Store, Entertainment Earth, Diamond Comics, and of course, as always, for a most expedient and best-looking service, our warehouse staff at Super7.com.
are rocking and getting them shipped out ASAP. And now that we are officially 2 full series into Reaction Plus G.I. Joe, it's like, you think, okay, now I'm starting to understand where we're going with this. But the best part about it is that I think if you have that understanding, your understanding is that it can go in a lot of places that you're probably not going to predict. So I'm already looking forward to seeing what's next.
Yes. And I think we did pull off a little coup and surprise yesterday and today as well with Reaction Plus. Which is, I assume, what's going to be next.
that is what is going to be next, and I'll preface that with yes, a little bit of a coup and an announcement. But the property that you announced for Reaction Plus is very exciting, and we are going to talk about that. But I think it's worth noting that it shows that Reaction Plus is expanding beyond G.I. Joe, and we're going to go into some interesting places.
Exactly. And that was there you go.
There we go.
So
Micronauts.
if we want to put on our like toy historian hat here, G.I. Joe 12-inch, 1960s, that is the articulation pattern comes from the 12-inch Joes. We're going to go through all this. 12-inch Joes go to Japan. Surprisingly, they don't sell well. Japanese don't want to buy American War figures. Never would have figured out why. Takara, who's bringing it over, turns them clear, turns them into a suit. Instead of buying army suits, you're buying Ultraman suits. You're buying, Rainbow Man, Inaza Man, whatever. Henshin Cyborg gets renamed. They put the guts in it. You get the Walders, which are the most amazing villains ever. The Korra King's awesome.
Yeah.
So you've got 12-inch colored and clear. Then you take that articulation pattern down. You have the 8-inch versions that are the Dennis Fisher cyborgs that happen in the UK. And then you scale it down to 3 3/4 for Microman, which is a Henshin Cyborg, which is a G.I. Joe scaled down to 3 3/4. With that articulation pattern. That gets brought over by Marty Abrams, Micronauts, whatever. But when G.I. Joe goes to make G.I. Joe, they're looking back at what is being done at Micronauts. That is the articulation pattern from G.I. Joe. So there's obviously tweaks that they make on it to make it more appropriate. But in a way, Micronauts, not in a way. I mean, Micronauts and Transformers are all downstream from G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
To finish this, for anybody else, I'm assuming 99% of the people watching this know this, but we got to finish the thing. Microman, then you take it from Microman at 3 3/4 and you scale it down to really tiny, and they're Diaclone, and now they're drivers for vehicles, and the vehicles transform. You get rid of the driver and you just have a transforming vehicle, and it's Transformers. It's all one giant big happy family. So coming back to that, we're like, one, Micronauts is the source for your 3 3/4 O-ring articulation. This is the base of where that articulation pattern came from. So making Micronauts in 3 3/4 and expanding upon their articulation pattern makes complete sense. Mm-hmm. It's part of the same family. It's part of the same whole. And because of how they put together the Micronauts line, they were pulling bits and pieces from everywhere. So Baron Karza, take his head off, that's Kotetsu Jig, Steel Jig, is who that character is. And it was a different Takara license. They were just like, cool, bring it over. He's the bad guy now.
It works.
Head. So everything from neck down is Kotetsu Jig. So we're like, all right, you had Baron Karza at like the 6-inch Magnemo scale, but you never had him in the 3 3/4 scale to fight a time traveler or a Pharoid or play with the aliens or anything else. So the first thing for me, collector-wise, I'm like, we need Baron Karza at the correct scale. Like, you've got the coolest, one of the coolest figures in the whole line. I mean, there's a lot of people who will be like, you aliens or nothing. Like, and they might be correct. But like, let's have Baron Karza at 3 3/4 in O-ring that you can put next to your time travelers and your spice gliders and your Pharoids and everything else. Like, he should be at scale to fight with everybody else.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because while I will say that I know Micronauts and I appreciate them and I'm a fan of them, I am by no means an expert on Micronauts. They were a little bit before me.
I'm going to say they're a little bit before your time because you're not this red, right?
I'm getting close. I'm going to get there. But it's interesting to see, because I knew off of sight that it's like, okay, Baron Karza, awesome. But what I know of Baron Karza is that he is a bigger character, because I did not know that he was actually from a different scale, because of a different line. And so he was always
brought a different toy line over. And just like with Shogun Warriors, like Great Mazinga and Raideen and Guy King and Daimos, those are 4 different TV shows.
Yeah.
Like, and in some cases, not even the same creators. They're just like, it would be like somebody coming over here and being like, Boss Hog.
I'm glad you're leading with Boss Hog.
Boss Hog, Knight Rider, Don Johnson, and
Hawkeye Pierce from the MASH line. How about we throw that in there?
Cool. 4 of you, you're now a super team. Wrap it up, ready to go.
Excellent. Okay. Well, that's great, because then I now have an understanding and appreciation for the fact that there are probably a lot of Micronauts fans like yourself who have always wanted or needed Baron Karza to be accurately scaled to the rest of the characters within that 3 3/4 world, right?
Yeah. Well, and the crazier part is, very late in the Takar game, they ended up making a 3 3/4 Kotetsu Jig. So you can get a die-cast sort of quasi Micronauts green and yellow Jig that kind of would be it, but it's not black and red, and it's not that head, and it's not Baron Karza. But the normal line that he was part of is called the Magnemo line, a magnetic line. And there's several different Magnemo toys out there. And he was one of them. And it was part of this Takara form factor. And that was the form factor they made for Kotetsu Jig.
Yeah.
So they just, when they were putting Micronauts together, they're like, we need a bad guy. And they're like, well, you can't use him. That's Jig. That's a different line. They're like, cool. Took the head off, made a new head, recolored it, called it a day.
Space robot Frankenstein.
There we go. There we go. So having this at least on a checkbox of like toy nerdery, but also like, what did I want and not have? I was like, we have to make Baron Karza in 3 3/4.
Well, I love leading with that because, to your point, something that wasn't technically ever had, and being able to do that, but just seeing a character of his popularity and a main character, it's like, okay, you're getting him in this, size that was never gotten before, but now knowing with what we just previously talked about that, Reaction Plus isn't beholden to exactly this size. It's like, it's interesting to see, how the history that you just gave of things coming together, and, I think that just makes the sandbox a little bit bigger for you guys to play in, right?
Oh, completely. And then obviously we're making nods to the original toy in here by painting the elbows and the hip joints silver, because that was the metal for the magnets.
Yeah.
Where the character is technically all black, if you will. Like, no, the silver is from the magnet. But so you're trying to find this fine line between what do I remember? What's my emotional? What's accurate to the character? Like, do you need to do that? Do you not need to do that? It's like, by painting those parts silver, like my brain sees those magnetic points. I'm like, it's Baron Karza, even though it's, all those things.
Well, that I appreciate the information and the history on that, because I think that'll lead us to a couple of other conversation points here in a second. But Baron Karza is not traveling alone in this first series, because you're also bringing out Biotron, and I'm going to need a little help with this one, because this one's a little bit outside of my very pedestrian knowledge of Micronauts. So I would love to hear the talk about this in the same way. Here we go. Professor Brian's TED Talk today.
With Biotron in the Japanese, so in the version that we have, Biotron's about 12 inches tall, and that clear section in his chest opens up, and you can fit a 3 3/4 action figure inside it.
Oh, wow.
In Japan, he is called Robot Man. And Robot Man is accurate. And Robot Man is sort of the main character. Like, he is the driving force. He's the main guy in the line. And then everything sort of supports and comes around him. Over here, Biotron was just basically a vehicle.
Okay.
So same thing. It's like, okay, Biotron only existed in 12-inch. Let's bring it down to 3 3/4 and make it, O-ring playable, and have that 12-inch figure now live in the same lineup, just like we're doing with G, but now Biotron lives at 3 3/4, so he can almost like be another one of the characters within the universe, rather than just most people look at Biotron as a vehicle stateside.
Right. A mech, and he's like kind of like a mech suit in the original. Is that how?
Not really, because he's an actual like the head. Like, he is a character. He can just carry a figure with him, but he has these tank treads on the back, and you put batteries in him. He's electronic, and he can drive around a little bit. So obviously, when it's brought over, it's basically like this cool robot vehicle. But it's very much made and sold as a vehicle rather than a character. And so I was really like, I want to make sure that Biotron is seen as a character within the Micronauts world. That's, another character, if you will, just like time travelers and everybody else are. He is a character as well. He is not a vehicle.
Got it. Well,
and then you have a good guy versus a bad guy.
Right. Of course. And that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting to me then to ask, because obviously these are the first two figures. Things are just getting started, but that doesn't keep, planning and things from occurring when you're, approaching a new property in a relatively new line. But when you're approaching Micronauts in Reaction Plus, is this, bringing them into, a a scale or relative scale, whatever, that wasn't really occurring in the past because of coming from other lines and things like that. Is that part of like your overall thought process with this, or is this just we want to, explore all the avenues of things that we didn't have before? Or it seems like there's a lot of history to mine with a line like this, I guess I should say.
I think there is. I think it's more of a case, like, once again, is I'm really looking at the vintage line as being your core line.
Mm-hmm.
My job is to extend that line, not necessarily remake that line.
Okay.
Right? Because, like, back to G.I. Joe, if we're talking about G.I. Joe and it was, if I made it look like regular old Duke, you can go to eBay and buy a regular old Duke loose.
Yep.
Cheaper than it's going to cost me to make and sell you a brand new one. Just because they're still available.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And with Micronauts, it was the sort of same thing. Like, they do get expensive at a certain point, but like, if you want vintage Micronauts, it's not like they're unavailable. Like, if I'll use a better example. Like, if you want a vintage Scratch Cat from Turtles, you can't just go get one. If you want a vintage blue Snaggletooth from Star Wars, you can't just go get one. But for a lot of these other characters, you still can go get them, depending on how much you're willing to spend, what condition you're willing to accept, how long you're willing to look. They are generally available in some manner or form, right? So in that regard, no one needs me to go back and remake the thing that already exists. My job, at least in my opinion, is to take what exists and make the world bigger. And so that's really what I'm focused on here, both in G.I. Joe and with Micronauts, is how do we expand the world of Micronauts?
And that's always a great thing to talk about, kind of, I think, in relationship to like core characters and whatnot, because I think you're talking through and the rationale behind bringing the Baron Karza into this scale, something that people have never had, and it's also impacting a main character. Now, there are obviously other main characters that maybe had life in the vintage lines and whatnot, but Micronauts existed beyond just the bounds of vintage toys too. They found their way into other like media properties and whatnot too. Are those spaces that you guys are looking at as well?
We are looking at it for sure. There's definitely, I mean, I don't know if it's a secret or not a secret, but I mean, right now, I think that let's say I think, and then I'm like, it's not a secret. Like, right now, Marvel and Hasbro are trying to understand exactly who owns what with the comic book. There are comic book characters that would be amazing to be made. I think, I think for everybody out there, they all look at it and they go, we want Bug. Where's Bug? And I would love to make Bug. And I feel I don't have a green light now, but it does seem like in the future, we will most likely have the green light to go down that route, but it's not yet. But it's being worked on, and maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. I am optimistic, but as of this time, we can't go down there. But yeah, like, the Marvel comic book was a really big thing for this, because for a lot of people, they know more about Micronauts from the comic book than they do from the toys, because the comic book was out when the toys were actually coming off shelf, and the comic book ran for a while. So,
Well, exactly. And to your point, that gives more characters, but it also gives, an opportunity to revisit existing characters in different looks because of, how they appear different in those other medias, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So,
okay, well,
yeah, I don't know. I'm super excited about it. It's also one of those lines that, we just announced for everyone watching this. Like, literally yesterday we announced it, and from now until when we got together, these pictures have been out on the internet for maybe 4 hours.
Yeah.
Maybe. We really did not know, and we still theoretically don't know, but it's been very positive so far, how people were going to react to it, because with Micronauts, you are talking about a license that was popular in the mid to early 70s. Like
Right.
you're talking about 75, 76, 77. How old is that person? Does somebody out there collecting today remember, care, like, enjoy Micronauts? You know, you're never quite sure. I know what I like, but I'm also old man in here. So, how many other people are going to come to it? So, you know, there is a little bit too here where the first wave is, you know, where somebody's like, where's all the other characters? It's like, well, let's step out small because we really want to make it. Make sure it's successful so that we can lean into it properly rather than like come out with a whole bunch of figures and then it doesn't land quite as well as we had hoped. And then all of a sudden, then we can't keep going with that line. I would much rather sort of wade into it and really see how many people are coming along with us. So that's also part of it too, why there's only 2 in here. It was originally 4 and we cut back to 2 just to make sure that, you know, it sounds corny, but make sure it's successful so that we can make the other things.
Right.
You know,
and these are scheduled to ship around March. At least that's what they are announced as. But I think going with this scale and, you know, the Reaction Plus too, because you talk about, you know, people of a certain age who have, you know, the nostalgia pull to this. I think that these are characters though that also exhibit some pretty crazy in a positive way, character designs that because they're in this scale and because they are kind of this like form factor, you know, again, I think people are going to be in for cool looking toys and how they can adapt them into things that they already have. It's like I said, I do not have a nostalgic pull to Micronauts, but I'll be damned if I'm not going to have that Baron Karza because it's just cool, right?
It is, and it is, and we're really also looking at that, you know, as you hinted to, if you will, like, okay, what's the world of Reaction Plus look like? Like, you've only really ever had G.I. Joe. You've had, I mean, theoretically, you can go back and say, oh, I had the A-Team, or I got the Knight Rider from Brazil. You know,
but for being such a popular thing, it was limited in terms of its properties, right?
In terms of the articulation pattern, it didn't go a lot of places, you know?
Yeah.
So now, can we expand the world for the people that are a fan of that articulation pattern? Like there are people that live and die G.I. Joe that, you know, as we know, we talked about, that don't buy our Reaction because it is an O-ring, and that is completely acceptable. But now imagine if, wait, you got more to choose from an O-ring. Do you want to expand your world rather than live just in G.I. Joe? And not just arbitrarily making it, but making it in lines that make sense. Like it really makes sense for Micronauts to be this way. Like Micronauts as Reaction, pure Reaction makes less sense.
That's, yes, I can understand that. And that's exciting though at the same time, because to your point, you know, there are people who that O-ring style is their style. We've talked about like the you guys have done that with the 1980s muscle, you know, 5.5 inch stuff. There are fans who that is their style, and that's the way they want their figures to be. So
yes. And I mean, and if you travel the world, and especially if you travel all the bootleg flea markets and toy stores around the world, I spent, you know, I was over in Egypt for a while, in other places, like in Turkey. Like you go to these places, like all those figures in those bootleg markets, they're all that old sort of Masters of the Universe style, body style, still to this day. You go through South America, Central America, all, you know, think about all the wrestling figures you've ever seen. They're either this or they're this, you know? And that particular format, you know, that style, like we think about it myopically within that, but there's 30 more, you know, bordering on 40 years more history of that style of body style across any number of licenses made in any degree of quality around the world, where you're like, actually, you could probably argue that form factor is more pervasive around the world than most any other form factor. It's just not a licensed product anywhere else in the world.
Right. Well, and that's what's cool about Reaction Plus is that you guys you're really taking on another style to be able to kind of bring in different worlds, because you're already doing that with regular Reaction. You can make the case that you're doing that with Ultimates as well, in terms of scale and style and whatnot, from a whole bunch of different properties that are kind of coming together in that kind of similar look and feel, and opening the door to the O-ring fans out there. I am now excited to think about licenses and places where you already play and places where you might be able to play. But I have a feeling that this year's going to be a big year for us finding out about that type of stuff.
There's some, yes.
Yeah.
Walk before we run.
Walk before you run. Yeah.
Walk before you run. But we're going to try to stretch the O-ring. I don't know, fan base isn't the right word, stretch the opportunity, whatever. We're going to do some other stuff in O-ring and try to really give that world a wider breadth. I keep calling it O-ring. I think technically I should be calling it Reaction Plus.
Reaction Plus.
If I put on my brand suit.
I was going to say, where's your marketing people here?
No, but like really getting out there and trying to do some fun things with this form factor.
And like all the different scales and form factors, it brings its own, strengths, charms, and things that work well there. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing not only these, but where things might be going next. And I appreciate the background and the history in terms of, Micronauts on the whole and how they fit into the larger expanse of, the action figure worlds that we know. So I'm looking forward to these, and I know a lot of other people are as well. So it just seemed like a good logical next step for Reaction Plus.
I think now that people have seen it, they're like, oh yeah, it makes complete sense, and it does. But I'm glad, at least, like I said, 4 hours into the internet, here, at least the overwhelming response has been people are like, did not expect this, and super amped.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and everyone, giving us a listen to, some corners of exciting stuff that we don't tend to touch on as much.
I was about to say, you've precipitously put this over your corner of your shoulder here.
Because I've got a little bit of that coming with some Shogun Reaction blind boxes here in the next few days, because that was one of the last things that made it to my doorstep prior to the winter apocalypse happening here. And
I want anybody this is not product placement for me.
No, I did that. I had it sitting here, and so I'm going to be taking a look at that, and hopefully next time some other things will be here. If I would have thought better, I wanted to show off my new Dungeons and Dragons Ultimates, because I'm going to do that next time, because I think it's worth it, because those are killer. I absolutely love them. I think they're some of the best Ultimates that you guys have done, and now I want more immediately.
Do you have them around?
I do. I have 3 out of the 4 of them. And of course, the one that I don't have yet, because these were gifts to me, and they're all shipping separately.
Christmas, was that correct?
Yes.
You were saying that in our December thing that they were under the tree for you.
Except Decion, because he's in the mail right now. The one that would probably be my favorite. But these are such a wonderful case of, I think I've been seeing people get them in hand and being like exactly what you said. Oh, here we go.
Well, and not to step on your words, but I think that's exactly what we've been talking about and waiting for, which is everybody's like, why do I need these? What's the difference between the ones that already came out? What's so different? It's like, I think when you get these in hand, they are different.
Yes.
And I don't want to put down someone else's product. It's not that. We're doing something different with it. And I think if you get them in hand, and that's the response that I've been seeing, the same thing is like, now that people have them in hand, they're like, oh, I get it now. I understand. And I saw somebody else's and was like, okay, wait a minute. This isn't what I thought it was. And I'm really optimistic that that's really going to sort of hopefully groundswell up a little bit more so that we can get to some more D&D stuff faster. And obviously getting Tiamat out is going to even help that even more, I think.
Yeah. Because I'm excited. I need it all. And I didn't have them because they're sitting over in another part of the space down here. But man, just Sheila's different swappable expressions are I don't normally rotate, swappable heads, but I'm gonna have to do that just because they're all so great and expressive. So
then I love that 2-pack of shadow demons. Like
it's they're perfect. They're perfect to kind of be on like the step behind, a little higher up the other characters, and just kind of looming as they do. So I'm very much impressed, and I'm really enjoying the D&D Ultimate. So hopefully people will feel the same way, and we get more and more and more.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody will say something negative about us both talking about them positively, but I'm in the same thing, and no, people are going to expect me to say it, but I'll come clean when we don't do what we're supposed to do. But like, I really feel like these turned out phenomenal. All of the team did a wonderful job on these, all the way through from sculpt to paint to project management, the factory everything sort of come together. They look like they just walked out of the cartoon.
Yeah, the paint and the engineering, like on the joints and stuff like that. Like I said, it's some of the best stuff that I've seen in Ultimates yet. So exciting stuff, and I can't wait for Decion to get here and then seeing what's next.
It's a skeleton in a suit of armor. How can you go wrong?
I know. It's like, you don't like to say, "Oh, that's my favorite," before you get him in hand, but I mean, come on.
We all know.
All right. Well, again, thank you for your time. I appreciate you, helping us talk about the new Reaction Plus, giving us a little Micronauts history lesson, and can't wait to see what's next. And, I think maybe we'll talk one more time before Toy Fair is going to be here. So it's crazy.
That first Friday
in March. It's the first.
Is it
it's
the first?
It falls on the first, I think.
Oh, first Friday will be at Toy Fair.
I think maybe I have to look, but yeah.
It's either the first or it's the
next day.
Yeah. Oh,
so
well then.
Yeah.
Well then. All right. Well, February we got a lot to do.
Yes, Cat Slayer will be here before that, so yeah, we'll get to talk through that, and it'll be fun. But in the meantime,
and we'll have shoveled out your mailbox.
As long as they can just get to the curb, I'll wait out there for them. But they haven't even made it that far at this point. So, all right, well, everybody, go check out the new Micronauts Reaction Plus, G.I. Joe Reaction Plus, hitting Target stores right now and other fine retailers. But in the meantime, enjoy, and we'll be back in like a month, and we'll talk about some more stuff.
Definitely. Everybody, thank you again, Nick.
Oh yeah, thank you
for watching.
Later, guys.